They didn't know what social media was. They didn't care what social media was. The National Hockey League was a client. PepsiCo was a client. Campbell Soup was a client. We had the biggest brands in the world paying us $5,000 a month. There was no industry. We started in May of '09. By the end of the year, we had about a dozen employees. The following year, we had about 30 employees. And then the end of the following year, we had 250. And then we had 400. And then it was off to the races because the industry started saying this is something that is meaningful. And once they decided to create budgets, we were the leader. And my brother was the loudest. And that's a good combo.
I recently visited the Macroscope office and spent time with their CEO, Kayvon Bakor, and it was so great getting to know him and his team. He and his co-founders previously ran all of consumer products at Twitter and founded Macroscope to fix the problems they faced every single day. Engineering teams are shipping faster than ever with AI, but nobody actually knows what's being worked on, what shipped, and where your team's engineering effort is going. Macroscope is a code-based understanding engine with 3 core products. First is Code Review, the highest signal, lowest noise reviewer out there. It catches critical bugs with the fewest comments. Next is Status, real-time visibility into what every engineer and AI agent is shipping. And third is their agent. Ask specific questions to automate workflows, approve and merge PRs, and fix bugs on the fly. Sign up at macroscope.com today and get $100 in free usage. And if you'd like to join their team, they're hiring across every single function. Apply online or reach out directly. If you like this podcast, you'd love the 100-year conversation. My friends at Timeless take an unusually long view on businesses and the people who build them. They believe that best founders do their best work in years 10 through 50, not years 1 through 5, and they wanted to learn from the operators who actually got there. So they started interviewing CEOs of institutions that have lasted, or have a real shot at lasting a century. Michael Dell, General Petraeus, Nikesh Arora, Tyler Cowen, and many more to come. Read the conversations at timelesspartners.com. Thank you so much for doing this.
Absolutely, man.
Like I told you on our call, I'm incredibly curious about all the things you do.
Sure.
I'd like to cover your life story and then also dig into the way you just manage all your businesses.
Okay.
I was telling them, I think it's amazing that you have, VaynerMedia, VaynerSports, restaurants and social clubs and Fly Fish and all this stuff, plus the fund, and then, all this other stuff you're doing. And I, in some world, would like to build up a lot of things I do in a similar manner.
Cool.
And so I'm curious how you've done it. To start though, what were you doing as a little kid? Where were you spending your time and what excited you the most?
So as a kid, I grew up in an immigrant household. My parents and my brother like to say that my sister and I are Americans because they were born in the former Soviet Union. So like, if there's ever a time to jab us for being American, they'll throw it our way. So grew up in a very immigrant household, even though I was first generation here. That was a really great foundation just in terms of like work ethic and perspective and things of that nature. The other thing that was really fascinating was that I got to kind of live through my family rising up the financial ladder. Like when I was born, we lived in a townhouse in Edison, New Jersey, and then moved out to the sticks in Hunterdon County, New Jersey, in a house that was from the 1800s. And, my dad was an entrepreneur. My older brother, Gary's an entrepreneur. And, my dad built this amazing business in the wine and liquor industry, what is now known as Wine Library in New Jersey and online. But then also my brother, teaming up with my dad and the impact he had on that business allowed that business to grow exponentially in the early 2000s when I was like 12, 13, 14, 15. And so like I watched my family go from like one tier of financial stability to a next tier to the next tier in like a 5-6 year window, knocked down that house from the 1800s and built a beautiful brand new house, started driving nicer cars, started going on more vacations, things like that. So it was really interesting to have like that hardcore immigrant frugal mentality, but then also experience and watch like my father and my brother together building this wealth. And, especially when the thing was rocket shipping, I was in late stages, middle school and high school, and I was always mathematically inclined. And it was awesome because like the dinner table conversation was mostly business. And my brother and my dad, to their credit, kind of let me see, whatever was appropriate for a 16-year-old. But I was looking at P&Ls and I understood the numbers and I understood business. And retail, I think, is a fairly easy business to understand, right? You've got your cost of the building, you got your cost of your staff, you got the cost of your product, and your profit is what you can sell the product for margin and what volume. And so that was that. And then grew up a diehard sports fan. That was very central, playing sports, watching sports, tortured long time New York Knicks and New York Jets fan over those years. And then I think the final piece of the puzzle for this, actually 2 pieces. One really seminal moment was when my brother went to college. He's 11 years older. I think when he came home in between his first and second semester for winter break, he brought home a laptop. And this was 1995.
Where did he go to college?
He went to a now defunct school called Mount Ida. He jokes that he's a UMass alum because UMass bought that Mount Ida, but he did not go to UMass, although he was wearing the sweatshirt yesterday, which cracked me up. Yeah, my brother went to college, but he literally drove home every Thursday and worked at the family business. He literally drove from Boston to New Jersey every Thursday and then back Sunday night every time, 4 years in a row. So he was at college, but not studying. And so he came back and he brought home a laptop. And we got AOL, and I was 8 years old, and I was online. I don't know how, in hindsight, people like moms and dads of today might drop their jaw, and there was definitely some chat rooms and forums that I probably shouldn't have been as an 8-year-old. I was mainly talking about the Jets and the Knicks in those chat rooms, but I just got exposure to computers at a very young age. So having a laptop that was, you plug in the phone line, the whole nine, I was using the shit out of it. And so I've always had a natural comfort with computers and technology because of that. And then the last piece is like entrepreneurial house. Dad's an entrepreneur, brother's an entrepreneur. My sister's now an entrepreneur, although that wasn't the first sector of career. And I learned so much about the foundations of entrepreneurship and business through actually eBay. I was I made so much money, especially for like a 7th grader. This niche story that I'll tell as quick as I can, and then I'll go. But you know what a bobblehead is?
Yes.
Little figurine, head bobs up and down. I grew up in New Jersey, and we have a grocery chain that was local to, I believe, New Jersey and Pennsylvania only, called ShopRite. And for whatever reason, ShopRite picked up an exclusive license to Major League Baseball bobbleheads. And so this was, I want to say this is right around the year 2000, maybe 2001 or 2. And so ShopRite had these bobbleheads, and they were selling Cal Ripken and Ichiro Suzuki and Barry Bonds. And eBay was just really starting to roll at that point. And no joke, I could go into a ShopRite and buy a bobblehead for, I believe, $9.99, and I was selling the bobblehead, Barry Bonds bobblehead, to a fan in San Francisco for $50. My mom would just drive me around to every ShopRite in town, and I would just clear it out. I would literally just have a shopping cart full of bobbleheads, and I was making like 3, 4, 5, 6x per. And my bedroom was a mini warehouse. I literally just had shipping boxes and figurines and tape and labels. It was much harder back then. Now selling on eBay, like it's a breeze. You take a picture, AI does it for you all. You hit submit, and like the post office comes and picks it up. Did everything manually. My mom would drive me to the post office. I was like a 13-year-old kid walking with 47 packages like 3 times a week. So learned a lot then, made a ton of money, and then took that and started like flipping. My brother talks a lot about flipping, and like I was just going and buying like old toys, video games, et cetera, et cetera. And same thing, I'd go to a garage sale, buy these toys for $20, sell them for $100. I once bought a shoebox of Super Nintendo games. There was 12 of them in there, and I opened it up. I was with my brother. This was like a Friday morning before he went to Wine Library for work. And I opened up the shoebox, and I'm looking at the games. And this is before I could have my phone on me. So when I went to a garage sale, I had to do the research. I couldn't just pull up my phone and be like, is this worth something? I had to study beforehand. And I walked in and opened the shoebox, and there was $2,000 worth of games. I literally was like, that's worth 100, that's worth 300, that's worth 50, that's worth 200. And I went over to the gentleman who was doing the garage sale, and I said, hey, sir, how much for the shoebox, the whole thing? And he's like, $20. And I was like, would you take 5? And he said, can we do 10? And I said, yes. And I walked over, and Gary's like, what'd you get? I was like, there's $2,000 worth of games here. And he's like, and you try to get it for 5 when he said 20 and he knows 2 G's in your hands? I was like, yeah. I think if you ask Gary cold, it might be the most proud he was as a big brother of me, that like I had $2,000 in my hands and I was still ready to negotiate. And so I learned a lot, man. I made a lot of money as a kid. And when I say a lot, I maybe made between like $10,000 and $30,000 a year as like an 8th grader, 9th grader, 10th grader doing this on the side.
Yeah, you're not paying taxes.
No, and I think I actually was. I actually was, because it was eBay.
Oh, sure.
I got, what is it, 1099 or whatever. I did pay taxes.
Okay.
I did pay taxes. I didn't have any, by the way, I probably wouldn't have if I could have. I was a kid, but I don't know if I even knew what it was, but no, I did pay taxes. But it was still an enormous amount of money for a kid my age.
Totally.
And so that was the early days, man. It was sports and business and not much in between.
Did you look up to anybody other than your dad and brother?
I looked up to my family. I didn't have a lot of exposure. That's been something that's been really interesting for me today. My parents were very introverted, like, whereas I'm pretty extroverted. And so now, I lived in a very remote area with immigrant parents who had a one-track mindset, like work their face off to make the American dream happen. They were cordial with like my friends' parents, but my parents never went out to dinner with my like other friends' parents or anybody except family. So really, my role models were just my family. I was the baby. I had an older sister who's 8 years older. I had a brother who's 11 years older, and I had my parents, and that's what I stuck it to. I never really had a lot of exposure to other people. We were insulated, so I kept it pretty simple for me.
What did you do in the latter half of high school and then, I guess right before college? What was going through your head? How'd you end up at Boston?
Yeah.
And then talk about your health issues as well and how that, affected you.
Yeah, so I was transitioning my entrepreneurship a little bit late in high school as I was getting ready for college. Was doing more stuff online, primarily just building interest-based websites and loading up Google AdSense and making money that way. So like I remember my senior year of high school, I created a website for the clothing brand Bathing Ape. They had a store in Soho.
Yeah.
And
I didn't know they were big back then.
That's when they were originally big.
Wow.
I'm old. This is their rebirth now. They were dead for a decade.
I did not know that.
They were humongous in like 20 years ago.
Was Kith around?
No Kith.
Okay, no Kith.
No Kith.
Interesting.
They had a single store in Soho, and they were ripping. And all I was doing was just creating content about like their new hoodies, their new shoes, and any money I made from that website, I would spend at the store. So if I literally made $450 that month, I would go buy a pair of sneakers. And that was my rule, because I couldn't justify spending $300 on a pair of sneakers. But I was like, well, if this thing about this thing is where I get the money from, it felt fine. So that's what I was doing. I actually built, Gary and I, along with a friend, Eric Kastner, who was the CTO of Wine Library at the time, we built a little tool to help people create MySpace graphics for their MySpace pages, where it was called Tag My. You go in, you type in your name, you type in a quote, and then we would give you the ability to create an animated GIF of a spray can spraying it. You could choose the color, you could pick the font, and that was it. And it would be put on people's walls, and if somebody clicked it, they would go, and we just had AdSense, and that thing was making a few $1,000s a month, which was fun. So that's what I was doing then. As far as picking school, Gary went to Mount Ida in Massachusetts. I had spent time in Massachusetts. My mom was desperately against me going anywhere far away. Like I wanted to go to California or Florida. She was like, fuck that. So it just made the most sense. The Amtrak, my family had a place in the city. Gary was living in the city. I figured I could just Amtrak up and down. So I went to Boston University. I was a little bit of a better student than my brother and my sister in that regard. And so went there. And then, you brought up my disease. So I suffer from something called Crohn's disease, digestive disease, no cure. It's only managed. And I had, hindsight being 2020, I probably started experiencing symptoms right around ages 12, 13. It's common for the symptoms to rise during puberty. So whenever that happened. And, but I diagnosed until my sophomore year of college. Again, immigrant household, we don't go to doctors. It's a genetic disease. And so when we talk to my parents, it's like, we think my Uncle Misha had it, but he passed away about a decade ago or so, and he never went to the doctor, never got diagnosed. But he always had a terrible stomach. And that's the theory, is that it comes from my dad's side in that regard. I walked myself to the hospital. I had a late night with my roommates. We ate like dog shit, pizza, Taco Bell, chips, whatever, candy. They drank. I didn't drink until I was 21, but I just remember waking up the next morning where they ate everything that I ate, and they also slammed home a bunch of beer, and they were fine because 19-year-olds are invisible, and I was a train wreck. And I was like, something's very wrong. Like the stomach pain I had was like an 8 out of 10. I'm like, this doesn't add up. And I literally woke up like on a Saturday morning, and I just walked. It was like a 3/4 of a mile walk, and I just walked to the hospital. And I was like, I'm fucked up. Something's wrong. And massive credit to that doctor. I got diagnosed instantly. Whereas people really struggle to get diagnosed with Crohn's and colitis because it's easy to miss. He's like, you need a colonoscopy. I got a colonoscopy like 2 weeks later, which was a humbling experience being a 19-year-old kid surrounded with guys, a bunch of guys in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. I've had more colonoscopies than anybody you'll ever meet because I have to get one every 3 years. Now it used to be every year. Now it's every 3. And they diagnosed me on the spot. And that changed my whole perspective. You can actually watch my GPA collapse. I had like a nice GPA 3 semesters in. And I called my parents. I was like, I don't give a fuck about school. Like, I'm fucked up. I need to not focus on shit that stresses me out that doesn't matter. I didn't even want to go to school, but it was important for my parents. They were immigrants. They didn't finish university. They came to this country to give their kids the opportunity to go to college. So I saw it through, but literally my GPA I think was like at maybe like a 3.4 or 3.5. And then I finished right around a 3. But those semesters were like plenty of C. I just didn't care. I just wanted out. And I was an entrepreneur. My brother and I spent most of my college career figuring out what business we were going to start. And literally, we actually started VaynerMedia about 5 weeks before I graduated, because Gary started selling to his network, and we got hired for a project from a large Fortune 500 brand, and they're like, you got to start now. I'm like, well, I'm not fucking out of college. And Gary's like, figure it out.
Do they know your age?
They knew Gary. We didn't tell them what was behind the scenes.
Do you think it was beneficial in hindsight that it made you do different things and that it was a difficult thing to go through?
I think I'm going to take the optimistic view. I like to look at my Crohn's as a blessing in disguise. I think because I have Crohn's, despite still struggling with it and it being a part of my life and not having this cure, I think it's helped guide me in a lifestyle where like I barely ever drink alcohol. I barely ever consume caffeine. I don't consume dairy. So it's led me, and I like to think that if I hadn't had Crohn's, I'm a big fan of food, and like maybe I'd have a much unhealthier lifestyle and would die from a heart attack, God forbid, at age 55. Whereas now with my Crohn's, I'm more aware of my body. I take care of my body. You know what I mean? So I look at it from that perspective. And I do think that Crohn's enabled me to be more focused on what it is that I want to do, right? Like my Crohn's absolutely led me to leave VaynerMedia. And I came public with my battle with the disease. I wrote this long article on medium.com, and like, I don't think I'd be running VaynerSports right now if I didn't have Crohn's, because I don't think I would have followed my passion as easily. It forced my hand in a way.
Yeah, totally. Were you excited? I guess, like, what is the early story behind VaynerMedia? I know you said you did this Fortune 500 thing. You go work with Gary. I don't know. What's the TLDR between?
It was Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
Because we were creating an industry. We were building the plane while we flew it. Social media was not an industry in 2009.
I guess, how much were you charging?
Very little.
Okay.
We had the biggest brands in the world paying us $5,000 a month because there was no industry. There was no industry. Nobody had it budgeted for. Nobody had it planned for. And so essentially, they would just find $60,000 in like the overflow. Like they would have maybe like an experimental budget or a rainy day fund. And anybody that really believed the vision, and kudos to the early, adopters of that. Like we had the National Hockey League was a client, PepsiCo was a client, Campbell's Soup was a client. They didn't know what social media was. They didn't care what social media was. They just thought there was something worth finding out, and we crushed. And we were $5,000 a month in 2009.
Were you, I guess, what was the metric? Were you getting them new sales, or was it just impressions? Like,
no, the metric back then was purely followers.
Okay.
Take our Twitter account, take our Facebook fan page, and grow the following. We were not back then. Now we do, but back then we were not tying into like sales metrics or KPIs or brand affinity or anything like that. It was, and the good news is, the bad news of a small budget is that we made very little money. The good news is it wasn't under a microscope. It wasn't overly stressed. Large brands spend $60,000 on a pre-party for an event. So like we didn't have people breathing down our neck to justify our value. They're like, hey, here's a small budget, go fucking experiment, go see what happens and see where this goes. And the early days of our business, it was slow go because there was no industry. And there was no budget, but so in 09, 10, 11, it was pretty slow, modest growth. First year, we ended that year. We started in May of 09, and by the end of the year, we had about a dozen employees. And then by the end of the following year, we had about 30 employees. And then the end of the following year, we had 250. And then we had 400, and then it was off to the races because the industry started saying this is something that is meaningful. And once they decided to create budgets, we were the leader. And my brother was the loudest. And that's a good combo.
Gary's been notoriously loud, and he's very good at it. You've been intentionally very quiet. Why is that? And is there some sort of broader reason for this, or just that?
It's a combination of things. I think one, it's personality based. Like my brother loves being out and about. He loves being on stage, and it's not where my love or my gravity is. So I think it just comes down to personal preference. We're just being authentic to who we are. And also, I honestly, in a lot of ways, I think it's what makes us work. Like we say it all the time, we are like 90% the same exact dude, but there's that 10% difference, and I think that 10% difference is complementary as opposed to friction, thank God. I think it helps that we're 11 years apart too. I think a big part of it too is also just like insecurity and just feeling as if like I was clearly, when we started, the number 2. I'm 11 years younger. At this point when we started, my brother was already very successful as an entrepreneur, had already built a big brand. Like when we launched VaynerMedia, he had over 1 million followers on Twitter. And so I just felt like, he's done it. It's justified. Like he has something to stand on. He should do it. And then he likes it. And then for me, I was like, I got to earn my keep. Let me focus on like building this thing. And I also felt that like, especially in years like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of VaynerMedia, we were building very fast. We grew from 25 to 750 employees in that window. And I wanted to make sure we weren't building a house of cards. And I'm very operational focused. And so I think it's just a matter of us just leading to our strengths and the things that we like. That's it.
I don't know if you're allowed to talk about this, but I'm very curious, like, what are the actual business metrics? You're charging people $5,000 a month, and now obviously don't tell me your numbers, but
yeah, I mean,
like, what could you eventually charge people per month?
Yeah, I mean, we have clients that have annualized scopes in the 8 figures. VaynerMedia is a mid 9-figure year revenue business.
And
like
do you consult them, top down, anything social media, anything,
it's expanded.
everything?
So first I want to level set. I left day-to-day operations of VaynerMedia almost 10 years ago. And so now I just serve as an advisor. I am not day-to-day. I am not intimately involved. I mainly just consult on like AI and what kind of role it can play both internally and externally. So I'm not deeply involved, but what I do know is that when Gary and I started, it was social media and social media only. And now anything and everything in which an advertising agency on Madison Avenue does, VaynerMedia does. And so soup to nuts, we manage billions of dollars of paid media. We do enormous amounts of production. We've done Super Bowl commercials. We do PR. We do social. We do content. We do analytics. We do it all.
Yeah, that's amazing. And
full service.
Did you always have this love for hospitality and restaurant touring and
no? I'll be honest.
Investing as well.
I'll be honest again, and I have to caveat. Like my role is purely as an advisor. Again, technologically based. So like when Fly Fish Club launched as an NFT project back during that bubble, I was very involved. When they built the restaurant, and as far as restaurant operations, I do nothing. I've gotten more involved in like the last 6 months, and I want to give a huge shout out to our CEO of VCR, David Rodolitz. And you and I were talking a little bit about this before we started recording. I'm extremely passionate about what AI can do in terms of taking an operator like a David and scale him. Do things for him that he's wasting his time now, enable him to do things faster, better, enable him to just have the tools at his disposal to be a better CEO. And out of all of our portfolios of companies, and we have numerous companies within our venture stack and our personal owned and operated stack, David has taken the buck by the horn the most. Like he has truly listened, he has truly dove in, and he's utilizing AI in an amazing way to scale the hospitality group. And so that's the extent of my work. For like the 2 things I do for the hospitality group is I work with David on inspiration and kind of strategy and tactics for how to use AI across the hospitality group. And then I help bring athletes into the restaurants because that's a good look. Yeah. That's a good look.
That's
for
right.
Our business. And then I eat all the sushi.
Yeah.
Those are 3 things I do for our restaurant group.
You're hiring this apprentice, right?
Yes.
By
the way, I got unbelievable response, which was awesome. It's indicative of the job market. I know it's a tough market. I think it's also indicative of like a cool blend of like sports agency and AI. But like my tweet and my LinkedIn posts, I've gotten 500 plus resumes, tons of like retweets and push and distribution and impressions But yeah, hiring an apprentice because we hired an entry-level staffer back in January, and he fit that same description, and I work closely with him, and we're just building fucking product for VaynerSports, and it's fucking awesome. Like,
what's your goal? Like undergrad or like a mid-career? Who do you want?
Like, I think a lot of people are graduating right now and they have no job. That's the pool I'm choosing from. Like, listen, it's an apprenticeship. You're gonna make minimum wage. Yeah. But the career path and the opportunity there, like, I don't think you'd be making, like, if you come in and 6 months later, like, you're showing that value, sky's the limit, whether it's within our company or elsewhere.
Well, the first place I joined, I worked for free.
Yeah.
And I told him I never want him to pay me. Yeah. Because then your monetary relationship is very different than a non-monetary relationship.
I agree.
Yeah, very interesting. And so how have you thought about starting VaynerSports, and what is the broader vision? Where do you spend your time? How have you actually built this, ground up?
Yeah, so I left VaynerMedia, and I had planned to take a 1-year sabbatical. And this was 2016. And get on the sabbatical, and it was great. I didn't look at my inbox, focused on my health. This was before kids. The only responsibility I had was my wife and our dog. And my wife was a teacher, and so I timed the beginning of my sabbatical with summer so that we both could be off before she went back for the fall. And really just like ate clean, did yoga, walked my dog, and played golf. That's like what I did. And then hung out with friends on the weekends. But like 2 months in, I got bored. I was 29. I was like, I can't be like retired. And so.
Were you financially satisfied or still trying to make more money?
I was financially satisfied. We had a good outcome. We built a big business. VaynerMedia is an incredible business, profitable, has a huge intrinsic value. So it wasn't, and I think my battle with Crohn's actually helped me put finances in perspective. Because when I was like a teenager, I wanted to be a billionaire. But when I was building VaynerMedia, that was no longer the goal. And so that definitely shaped a bit of how I look at things. But no, I was financially secure, which is a wild thing and a blessing. But I wasn't done as far as like intellectual stimulation. I was too young. And so, we had done a lot of investing along the way, angel investing. And so to kind of like ease my way back into the workforce, probably by the end of month 2, I just started talking to some portfolio companies and just started doing like unofficial advising.
Did you guys invest in Uber and all these companies around this time? Or was it
way before?
Way before, right?
Like Uber was 2010.
Yeah.
This is 2016. So Uber was one of those companies. Uber was at that point where I wasn't advising. The fun part is like when we first did Uber, I was never an advisor, but we were early investors and we were friends with Travis, who was the CEO at the time. And the coolest advising I ever did was like Travis came to what was the VaynerMedia office at the time. He had never lived in New York, and we literally spent an hour. And he's like, when do you grab cabs? Like, where are the cabs? Is it busier during rush hour? Like what parts of town should we be thinking of? My claim to fame, fun fact, is that I was the first ever Uber rider in New York City. Wow. That's like the cool thing I get to tell my grandkids. Literally, Travis called me one day. It was like Tuesday at 2:00. He calls me. He's like, what are you doing right now? I'm like, I'm working. He's like, you got 5 minutes? I'm like, yeah, I got 5 minutes. He's like, we're ready to launch Uber in New York City, and I want you to take the first ride and make sure nothing's fucked up. I'm like, awesome. He's like, all right, open up the Uber app. And I open it up, and I don't know if you remember, but it used to say like, Uber's not in your city yet, but like sign up now to find out when it comes. And he's like, all right, do you see like the wait list screen? I'm like, yeah. He's like, all right, I'm gonna tell the dev to turn it on. Literally like, hey, whatever, Rob, turn it on. And then all of Manhattan pops up. Slight adjustment. He's like, where's your office? I told him, he's like, I'll call you back in 20 minutes. They had the single black car drive to my office. And he's like, all right, turn it on. And there's a car right outside. I hit request, it accepts. I go downstairs. This is on 24th between 2nd and 3rd. And we literally just do a right. We just do a square loop back to my office, drops me off. I actually have the receipt framed from that first ride, and I got to be the first Uber ride. So yeah, but anyway, I digress. I started advising companies, the ones that weren't as far along as Uber. Uber didn't need any advising anymore from me. Was trying to see, poke around different industries, see if anything really caught my interest in my eye. And we had this one small investment we had made maybe a year prior into a small boutique sports agency. They had a handful of football players. We wrote a small check, like $25,000, just to help them do a little bit more recruiting, jumping on more planes and getting hotel rooms. And I found that a couple months into my poking around, that I was on the phone most often with that group. And by the way, that, out of the 50 portfolio companies, that probably had the lowest upside, the least amount of revenue, but it was just so true to my passion. And I thought I could take a lot of my experiences building a service business for brands and apply it to athletes. And just taking my passion for athletes, and to your point before, I was financially secure. I didn't need a salary. I could increase my investment in the company so that we could do more recruiting. And I formally decided to hop in. And that's been the priority for the last 10 years.
Did you acquire that company?
I did.
Okay.
So we originally wrote a small check, and then I broached them, and I said, hey, I think it's actually what I want to do for a living, but the only way I know to do it is by building my own business. Would you be open to me acquiring a majority interest and rebranding it to VaynerSports? The prior company was called Symmetry Sports. And so thankfully they were agreeable. They had equity in the new entity and bought a majority, injected some cash, rebranded to VaynerSports, and away we went.
Are they still involved?
One of the two partners is.
Nice.
One of them decided to leave the industry of player representation, and the other, Brian, a partner of mine, has been for the last 10 years, and I want to give him a shout out. He just had, for him personally as the lead agent, he just had his first round pick in last week's NFL draft. His client, Sonny Styles, went 7th overall in the draft. Huge accomplishment. We were together in Pittsburgh. He's still involved, a shareholder, and doing great.
That's great. How do you think about starting new businesses? We spoke about this on our first call. I think what I told you is I don't think peer software is the best business to start. And so I don't know. Do you have any broad thoughts on how to approach this?
I would say one, and this is a new thought, but you can't start a new company without looking through the lens of AI first and foremost. That's actually probably what I'm most excited about starting whatever the next company is that I get to start from scratch. Whereas VaynerMedia is 2,000 people and 15 plus years old. VaynerSports is almost 100 people and over a decade old. The first thing I think about when starting a new business is how does AI play a role in two ways. One, How is it a threat to the potential business? Like, will AI replace this? Will AI make this inefficient? Will AI da-da-da? But then more excitingly, like, how can AI allow me to move faster, scale more efficiently, make it more profitable, hire less people? And so that's one. And that's a new lens. That's a lens over only the last year or so. I would say it's a lens for the last 2 years, but it's only felt very real in like the last 6 months. Like, tools have gotten to the point where
very
they're that
actionable.
effective, right? Then the next thing is, how, if I enter this space, how can I enter it with a fresh perspective and be disruptive? I never want to jump into a business and just do what other people are doing. I want to have a new take, a new spin, and I want to disrupt. That's a big one. And again, now, a little bit different from me than you, but like, what unfair advantages do I have? Is there relationships or network that we have? Is there an infrastructure that we have? Like, you know, one thing that I think I'll do for whatever's next is like, I want to make it I don't want to say an easy win, but I want to pick where it makes sense for me based on having an unfair advantage. So I would say those are the 3 dominant lenses. Maybe 4 being passion, honestly. I want to enjoy what I'm doing at this point. That's a big one too.
How did you first meet Max Glick, by the way? I know he introduced us.
He hit me up cold.
Great.
Yeah, he hit me up cold.
Great.
I just liked his cold email.
Yeah.
And I don't do a lot of that. So kudos to him.
Yeah.
And I love young entrepreneurs. I'm always going to lean that way.
What do you think young people should keep top of mind? I guess the better framing is for your apprenticeship, right? Do you think people should go start the best companies, or should go do something, or should they go apprentice under somebody who's more experienced and go work for free or do something?
All 3.
Okay.
Like, I take a lot of calls as favors, if I'm being honest. But I enjoy doing it because I attribute. Was that
with young people?
Yeah.
Okay.
With mainly college kids. A big reason I lean towards that is I don't think I'm anywhere in my career without having, like, I had my brother who was 11 years older mentoring me. Like, when I was 16, 17, he was 27, 28, already extremely successful. That I can't fathom what I would have done without that. And so I feel like a sense of obligation to give that back and be a big brother. Although I'm starting to age out a big brother. It was more fun when I was 28, 29. I was like, oh, this is, now I'm like almost fucking 40. I have 3 kids. So I'm entering dad zone soon. Probably like 5 years away from older brother into dad zone for a lot of these college kids. But I feel like a broken record. I apologize, but I think it's just the state of our world right now. When I talk to these kids, 9 times out of 10, it's, I love sports. I want to work in sports. And what I always tell them is, listen, I'm going to be straight with you. There is a bad dichotomy that you're dealing with, in that there are a flood of young, bright people that want to work in sports, and there is an extremely finite amount of job options for that. And it's even harder now with AI and all that stuff. And so I'm always candid with them. And so to answer your question, what I tell them is like, hey, this is the benefit of losing my hair and getting closer to dad zone than big brother zone, is that it's no longer my first or second rodeo. I'm on my like 3rd rodeo. And using the analogy of social media for AI, when we were hiring in like the teens, call it like 2011, 2012, 2013, if there was 2 identical candidates that were both awesome and they both interviewed great, and one was active in engaging with and creating social media content and the other was not, Ty went to that social media one. Same thing with AI. If I've got 2 brilliant kids that are both graduating from Duke and they love sports, and one played baseball at Duke and the other played lacrosse at Duke, and everything's the same, and they both got awesome references, and one's like, I spent 8 hours last week building shit in Claude, and the other's like, I haven't touched Claude, it's very clear where I'm going. And so finally, long-windedly to answer your question, it's like, they should be building their own shit and using the shit that they build themselves as their interview for something like an apprenticeship. And then they need to figure out if they want to do their own entrepreneurial thing, or if they want to join a FANG or a big Fortune 500. But no matter what, if anybody listens to this, download Claude, sign up for the $20 a month, and start building. And if you don't know where to start, just ask it. Literally, Claude, I'm a junior at Colorado State, and like I like fishing and watching Bravo, and like I need a job, and the economy's super tough, mainly because of you and other factors. Like, but I should build an app. Like, how do I start? And you will get there. Yeah. Like, it's unbelievable that we live in a society now where anybody can build anything if they're able to have a conversation.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, again, back to the business thing, is the most defensible business? Do you think it's some sort of service-oriented business that is just accelerated with AI?
Defensible business?
Yeah.
I think live events is the most defensible.
Totally.
I think I benefit greatly if you look at sports as an industry, when it comes to like cable and streaming and AI, live sports has been impenetrable. And maybe we get to a point where we're going to watch robots playing sports, but I think we're pretty far away. I'm not putting it past us as a society. But like right now, running a sports agency off the foundation of live sports being the best TV asset, and in my opinion, the most defensible asset to AI is a great spot to be in. But I think live events as a whole, whether it's sports or something else, is probably the most defensible thing right now.
What do you think the path is to you guys owning the Jets? I know that's the long-term goal.
You know, it's long and far.
How long do you think it is? Do you think it's many decades or no?
Yeah, it might be a decade or two.
Nice.
We're going to need some time. Price keeps going up.
Yeah. Are you happy day to day now?
Yeah.
Nice. Do your kids, do they come to work with you? Do they kind of understand what you do?
Last week was bring your kid to work day.
Yeah, they didn't come.
But I was in Pittsburgh for the draft, and it didn't work. But I heard it was awesome here at Vayner. Like, I was pissed. I'm hoping the draft doesn't fall the same way, because now my kids are at the age where, like, I feel like this was the first year where I'd be willing to take 3 kids myself into the office and like do the whole thing, like hour commute and go into the city and bring them here.
Do they get what you do?
The 2 older ones do. My youngest still doesn't fully grasp it. But no, it's my kids definitely grasp it now, which is cool. And they like it, and they're sports fans, and yeah, they understand it now. It took a little bit of time.
Are Gary's kids also right here? You said,
yeah,
like
they live in the city. Yeah, they live in the city.
Why did you decide to go to the suburbs? It's like such a different lifestyle.
Easy. My wife hated the city. It's an easy answer.
Yeah.
And she's from the Boston area, and being up in Westchester, New York, was the compromise. You know, my business was foundationally in New York. I needed to be near the city. I like being in the office. I like being in the city. But she hated living here. So she gave me 5 good years, and then we did.
Do you think Gary's going to stay here for a long time with his wife and kids? Yeah.
He's in the city. He ain't leaving.
Interesting. And is he involved with VaynerSports?
Oh, yeah.
And he's doing, like, is he day-to-day involved? Or
there's not a single thing professionally that he or I do that one or the other is not involved. Now, there's scales. I am a very light advisor. I spend 3 to 5 hours a week as an advisor to VaynerMedia. He probably spends an hour a week on VaynerSports, but then he probably spends 25, 30, 40 hours a week on VaynerMedia. So like everything that happens, we're both involved, but it's a pendulum in terms of like the scale of how involved, and it's always very clear who the lead horse is. So we're not tripping over one another or anything like that.
What do your parents say looking at what you guys have done now?
They're the best. They're just so proud.
Yeah.
It's fun because I think when we first got started, they couldn't understand it, predominantly around social media and everything.
Totally.
I remember my senior year of high school, I actually had a quote unquote real job at one point. You know, I'm a very hard worker. I was running a full-time warehouse doing eBay. Like I said earlier, I was building like websites and monetizing them through like affiliate links and Google AdSense. I would work at the family business and do the grunt work of like dusting bottles and moving boxes in the basement. But there was a day where I was online. I was spending a lot of time on my computer, whether it was doing eBay or building these websites. And my mom basically just walked in and was like, you need to get off the computer and get a real job. And it's because she just couldn't quite understand it. And I was like, Mom, like, what are you talking about? I don't need a job. I'm making more money than anybody that it was at a grocery store.
Yeah.
She's like, go be a cashier at a grocery store. And I was like, yeah, I had a friend that was doing it. And so I did it. And it was soul crushing because I was like losing money by doing this job I didn't want to do. I'm like, every hour I'm spending here getting paid $11 an hour, I'm losing out on like $300. And so I did it maybe for like 5 or 6 weeks. And then I told my mom, I was like, listen, I really don't know what to tell you other than like, I'm working at home. I'll show you the bank statements. That's like, I don't know, what is work meant to do? Work is meant to create money. And then in turn, like my job now is to provide for my family. So like, if this bank statement that shows I made $4,000 last month doesn't indicate that I'm working, then what does? And I'm losing money by working at A&P in Clinton, New Jersey, and I hate it. And to her credit, she heard me. And it's something I get to bring up from time to time for fun. And like, she's like, I didn't understand what you were doing. Like, I'm sorry. But no, they're super proud.
Did you play sports growing up?
I did, but I wasn't a great athlete. I did all the things.
Why do you think you're competitive? At least for myself, I view it as a multitude of things, but a lot of it was from sports.
You know, my competitive gene is not from sports. I played it. It's like chicken or the egg. Like you mentioned, some people can get competitive from sports. I think I walked into sports competitive. Super competitive house. I think that scrappy immigrant lifestyle drives that. I think DNA. I think it is genetic.
Yeah.
I know it's genetic. because I look at my kids,
Uh-huh.
and I don't think my wife would describe herself or her family as competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And my 2 older kids are competitive. My youngest is in her own world. She's the best.
How
She's
old
so
are they?
creative and different.
So 9?
My oldest daughter turns 9 shortly. My son just turned 7, and my youngest daughter's 5.5. The 2 older ones are extremely competitive. So I know it's genetic because they spend most of their time with their non-competitive mother, and she like shakes her head.
Yeah.
It can be embarrassed. By the way, raising a competitive child can be embarrassing, right? Like, we're out on the street. We live in this beautiful neighborhood, lots of neighbors with little kids, and we're playing kickball. And my son will go up to the plate and he'll kick it, and if he lines out to like one of the dads, like he might quit and walk home, like because he was so pissed. And like that's embarrassing that like my son, you know what I mean? I'm not that embarrassed, but my wife's embarrassed. And I get it. And so I think it's genetic, and I think it's the product of growing up in an immigrant household, and I think it correlates with just having ambition and things of that nature.
What drove you when you were younger? Was it mainly making money?
When I was younger, yeah.
Yeah.
I was a capitalist.
Was there like a number? It was like, oh, I need to make $1 million and
On the Jets.
Sure.
That was the number. It was an artificial number. But no, I was very money driven. And listen, I'm talking about being 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18.
Yeah. Well, what about early 20s? So you started VaynerMedia. What was
Crohn's? I lost the capitalistic perspective of Crohn's.
Okay.
It took a lot out of me in that regard. I valued life in a lot of different ways. But I was still fucking competitive. But yeah, the money wasn't the driver. It was I think it was the competitive nature, and it was insecurity. I felt a lot of pressure to be successful. Having a brother like Gary, who is so successful and so visible, that put a lot of pressure on me. But I was able to harness, and thank God, there was never an ounce of resentment towards Gary. He was my partner. He was my best friend, and is my partner and best friend. But I had a lot of insecurity that drove my ambition and my work ethic. That was from that.
What is everybody behind you doing, by the way? What do they spend their time on day to day? And I read this, the call me daddy or call her daddy thing. Is that the podcast?
Yeah, that has to be. Yeah. I mean,
like, I guess, how's the company split up internally?
Yeah, so we're here at Hudson Yards, which is the HQ across all the Vayner businesses. So VaynerMedia is the predominant tenant, but we run VaynerSports out of here. We run VFriends out of here, amongst other businesses.
Are you guys still bullish on that, NFTs generally?
NFTs, I am still bullish on digital collectibles and the blockchain.
Sure.
I think NFTs need a rebrand. I think they still need technological advancement to make it easier and more secure. Like, people are losing their shit. People have a hard time getting onboarded. But I am still a buyer in digital collectibles. I'm still a believer in the blockchain. I think blockchain is going to play a major role when it comes to provenance and validating real content versus fake content in an age of AI. But it's been a tough industry. But massive credit to my brother and his team. Like, what VFriends has been able to accomplish by taking the original foundation of NFTs and still leveraging those NFTs, but building more of a intellectual property centered around storytelling and collectability. Think like Pokemon meets Sesame Street. I mean, that business is killing it. Which you can't say about 99.9% of NFT companies. So everybody's doing different things. Honestly, it's so hard to say. Like, out of the couple hundred people that are here today, there's probably 100 different job titles amongst them.
Is that your dad's name, by the way, Sasha? Right? Yeah, I'm
sure
just
is.
looking around.
That's and then we actually just launched a spin-out agency under VaynerMedia and VaynerX called Tamara, and that's my mom's name.
No way.
So yeah.
What's the focus of that?
Just the natural growth of agency holdcos. It was just like a necessary structural pivot spin out.
I guess, do you have any questions? I guess that's a good flip. What questions would you want answered from a young person, and maybe like what is top of mind for you?
97% of my clientele is between the ages of 18 and 24, so I'm shockingly in touch with the younger generation. But my question for you specifically, what has been, I know why you're doing this podcast, so far into it, what has been like the greatest thing that you've gotten out of it? Whether it's a lesson or an experience, like what do you have the most gratitude for coming out of this project so far?
One of my earliest guests, named Chad Byers, his father founded Kleiner Perkins. Chad founded Sonith Ventures, has done incredibly well. He told me that his mentor, I think it was Scott, who founded Intuit, or somebody told him this. that the reason to become the best at what you do is like sure to make money, sure to have power and leverage, whatever. But like the better reason is because if you're really good at what you do, you'll be able to spend time with a lot of other people who are good at what they do, and that's a full life. And his example was because chefs spend time with investors, and because people like yourself go spend time with people like David Tisch or athletes, and that really drew me because I don't know of any other way to consistently broaden my perspectives. I'm gonna go in a few weeks to the French Laundry in Napa, not to eat, but to work with them on their team.
Can't eat?
Well, I'll eat as well. But they don't let people, I guess it's called staging. I thought it was called staging. But they let you apprentice with their team.
That's awesome.
No way I would have even like thought that was possible until somebody introduced me.
That's
and then I want to go interview Thomas Keller.
Yeah.
And I'm not a good chef.
Yeah.
I hate cooking, but I love food.
Yeah.
And so my answer is that this is the best way that I've seen to broaden my perspective.
I think it's a brilliant way to look at it.
Yeah. I think it all comes back to what Chad said.
Yep. I like that.
And I don't think that'll change for the rest of my life. It excites me.
It's a good North Star.
Yeah, and I think it would be a very cocky perspective or like a weird perspective if I got to a point where I was like, I don't care to meet that next person.
Yeah.
Because that would mean I'm not curious about the world and something wrong has happened.
Yeah.
So that's my North Star.
Good stuff, brother.
And I'm very capitalistic and competitive. So that'll be the case for a long time.
Good.
And maybe my medium-term goal, rather than buying the jets, is maybe getting a jet. So
Fair enough.
That's a good one. That'll be the goal.
I love it, man.
But amazing.
Awesome, brother.
I appreciate it.